What up, nerds? My name is Leslie. Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative. On this channel, I like to talk about all sorts of bookish related things and just about any genre you can think of. At this point, there's literally no telling what I will stick my nose into next. So today's episode of fun will be my March wrap up. I'm going to just go over all of the things that I read in the month of March, share with you what my star rating was, and just some very brief thoughts about each of those things. So the very first thing that I read in March is a short story called Beginnings of a Fortune by Clarice Lispector, and I read that from the Complete Stories collection. Beginnings of a Fortune is actually part of her Family Ties collection, but I really enjoyed the story. It was fun for me. It wasn't one that had me thinking for several days like a lot of hers do. It was one that I felt was just more of a quick, fun little lesson for youngsters in regards to money and what they need to do with it and how much they need. I had a really fun time reading it, but then again, I haven't read a Clarice story that I haven't enjoyed yet. Next, I completed the Nailbiter series. That is the first series of Nailbiter. There is a second series called Nailbiter Returns. Haven't gotten into that one yet. For the 30 issues in the Nailbiter series, I did rate it a 4-star. It was my very first reading of a creator-owned American comic, and I really enjoyed the experience. I definitely loved the comic and the story itself. It's classified as horror, but to me it was more of a true crime, and I loved it. I thought the ending was a touch weak, so overall I ended up giving it a 4-star rating, which is still a fantastic rating. I'm definitely going to give Nailbiter Returns a shot because it is quite possible Nailbiter ended the way it did with a reasoning behind it for Nailbiter Returns. So my next completed read is Elantris, and it took me over 2 months to get this book read. And it's probably the shortest book that Brandon Sanderson ever wrote. I'm not talking about his novellas, I'm talking about actual books. The story was just slow for me. My other experience reading Sanderson, I loved a lot of the characters, most of the characters in fact. With Elantris, I really only got invested with a couple of them. This one ended up being a 3-star read for me. It has absolutely no reread capability at all. It just didn't resonate with me in any way. You know, the characters, the world building, the story, none of it sucked me in at all. So, next up, I was fortunate enough to get my hands on the ARC for My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. This ended up being a 4-star read for me. It 100% has reread capability for me. I got the ARC in an ebook from NetGalley, but I had already pre-ordered the hardback that's coming out later this year in August. This book was just absolutely a delight for me. I'm a huge fan of all of those 70s, 80s, 90s slashers. Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, all of those. Stephen Graham Jones just has a real knack for writing fun horror stories, but they sneak up on you. You forget it's a horror story until all of a sudden stuff starts going sideways fast. I absolutely adored this book. I will be rereading it once I get my hands on it in August, and you will definitely be getting a dedicated review from me on that one closer to time of release. Then right at the beginning of the month, I finished Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. While this one was a 4-star read for me, it doesn't have any reread capability whatsoever. I would much rather watch the movie again. The major differences I can remember is the movie made the puzzles a little more easier for the characters to figure out what they were doing. They were definitely more involved here, a little more intrigue involved. But the allure of this story for me was the walk down memory lane of the 80s. Everything 80s. The hairstyle, the amount of hairspray used on those hairstyles, the clothing, the music, the movies, the sitcoms, everything 80s. Nothing was left out. I absolutely loved the walk down memory lane, the history of all of the gaming consoles and the games played on them. It was an absolute super fun read for me. I enjoyed it. I'm glad that I read it once. And that brings me to my very first 5-star read for March, and that is The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King, book 2 in his Dark Tower series. And wow, was this one a complete and abrupt change from The Gunslinger. Now, I enjoyed The Gunslinger. I enjoyed all of the questions that arose with that one for me. I enjoyed exploring this one for answers to those questions. What I ended up with was 1 or 2 answers and a whole lot more questions. But the pacing in this one, the tone, was just amazing. But this one, where this one shined for me, was the character development. I did not know Stephen King could have me falling in love with characters the way that he did. If The Gunslinger had not already done its job in hooking me into this series, The Drawing of the Three would have clinched that deal, no doubt. This book was absolutely amazing, and I can tell you, I will definitely be rereading this book, if not the series. I knew going in I was going to reread The Gunslinger. I knew that once I finished the series, I wanted to go back and reread it at the end just to make all the connections and see what I remembered and what I maybe missed as far as things that just happened along this path to the Dark Tower. But this one, yeah, this is definitely going to be a reread for me. Even if I don't reread any of the rest of the series, I'm definitely going to revisit this one because I absolutely loved the character development. I just absolutely loved it. The story itself is so unique. This is not something I've read about in any of the other more current books. I mean, this book is old, y'all. First came out in the late 80s, I believe, and it still holds up. I mean, sure, it's dated. Some of the descriptions of the scenes in New York, they're definitely dated. I mean, but even so, the story holds up. So the next book that I completed is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This one I read as part of a read-along that was hosted by the Codex Cantina, Christy Lewis, The History Shelf, and a Musical Bookworm. And for someone like me who does not have a strong foundation for understanding Russian literature or knowing a whole lot about Russian history, doing it with a read-along with other people who do have that foundation made the experience a completely different one for me. If I had just picked this up to read by myself, I would have likely DNF'd it and missed out on a lot of the enjoyment of it. As a result, I'm still not sure where I stand on it. I haven't rated it yet. I just don't feel it fair for me to do so, not knowing enough about the history at the time, the culture, to understand what the author was trying to accomplish with this narrative and the development of its characters. So my goal is to do a little bit of homework, learn a bit more about the culture and the time frame before diving back into more of his work, just so I can better understand what is going on in these stories that these Russian authors have put forth to us, and it will also increase my enjoyment of it as well. So my next read was also a 5-star read, and that is Severed by Joshua Marcella. Severed is the prequel to his debut novella Scratches, and it is absolutely amazing. I would still tell you, if you've not read either of these two stories, still start with Scratches, and here's why. When I read Scratches, I loved it. And the scariest person and the scariest character from Scratches is what this prequel is about. And I knew that going in. I knew who this was going to be about. I knew what this story was going to be about. Joshua Marcella just showed his genius at storytelling with this prequel. He tied it in perfectly to where Scratches starts. But not only that, I think where I'm most amazed, how he changed what I thought about this character in Scratches. There is going to be a 3rd book. It's going to be a trilogy. It's definitely a struggle not to harass him every day as to, hey, have you started that 3rd book yet? And next up, I read The Gulp by Alan Baxter. That is a collection of 5 short stories that take place in the town of Gulp in Australia. This one was a 3-star read for me. So for those of you turning your nose up because I said 3 stars, 3 stars is still a good book. I still enjoyed it and I'm glad I read it. In addition, 3 stars for me means I wanted more. It means potential for more. And that's what I wanted from these stories. All 5 of them. I wanted more, which is crazy. They're short stories, but I wanted more. I wanted them to be longer. I felt like just as he got to the best part of the story, it was over. And I was so disappointed it was over. I buddy read this with my friend Jay from J Maddox Entertainment. We were both in complete agreement with our thoughts regarding this collection. You know, at first we thought all of the stories would be wrapped up with the 5th story, and that just wasn't the case. And in addition, the 5th story we both were very bored with, unfortunately. Rumor has it there's going to be a 2nd collection from Gulp. I'm going to let some other reviewers read that and give me some feedback, because if it's going to be another collection of sort of unresolved stories, then I'm not even going to try, because it's just going to trigger me. So next on the list is Sed de Sangre by V. Castro. I read the first story. I didn't realize that it was erotic horror. I liked the first story. Again, with Alan Baxter, I felt like I wanted it to be longer. I liked the story, not so much the erotica involved. It was quite frankly distracting. I did not enjoy it at all. I read a few pages and I was like, you know what? This one isn't for me. I flipped to the 3rd story in the collection and I was like, yeah, I can't do it. So I learned something new this month. I learned I do not like erotic horror. So I DNF'd that one. Next up was an audiobook that I listened to, and that is As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. This was a surprise hit for me. It has been a very long time since I actually read any of William Faulkner's work. But I do recall when we studied him in high school and college, I wasn't as mad about it. I actually enjoyed him more than others like John Steinbeck and Ernest Hemingway. Faulkner just has a way of connecting me to his characters that just feels very authentic. As I Lay Dying has a lot of characters, which I thought at first I was going to have trouble with the audiobook. But the audiobook had 4 different narrators. They gave all of the characters different voices. I had no problems distinguishing who was who because of that. I really enjoyed this audiobook. It just gave it more the narrators did an excellent job of connecting me to when the characters were feeling grief or they were upset or the urgency of whatever they were experiencing at the time. It just really added to the experience. But this story I did give a 4-star rating to. It is about a family. The mother has passed away, and the family you would think are dealing about their grief over the passing of their mother, but as you get into this story, you really find out each of these characters has a different personal situation going on that they are more focused on than the passing of their mother. But the journey of this family involves building the coffin and getting the mother from where they are currently to Jefferson County, where the mother is from, so they can bury her. I just really enjoyed this book. It had a lot of surprising humor in it for me that I found, but I just really loved this story, and it's just reawakened desire in me to read more of William Faulkner's works. I am definitely going to enjoy doing that. Next, I read Siege and Storm, Book 2 in the Shadow and Bone trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. This one was a solid 4-star read for me. It would have been a 5-star if the Darkling had actually been in this book more. He was very absent, and it just left a gaping hole. He was so compelling in the first book, and I just loved him. I have a huge crush on him, which is probably why I felt like there was a huge hole in this one, but I still enjoyed it. It definitely had a great plot that moved it forward. There was something that happened right at the front end that I felt should have had a little more lead up to. I felt like it happened too quickly, but I ain't mad at it. The ending was very strong, and I am about to die to get my hands on Ruin and Rising. This one did a really good job of cementing my enjoyment for Leigh Bardugo as an author. The next book that I started was an e-arc I received from NetGalley for review. That is The Conductors by Nicole Glover. This was a DNF. I just couldn't get into it. I read about 35-40% before I threw in the towel. I just didn't care about any of it. I did not connect to any of the characters. The plot was too loosely formed for me to care about it. I just wasn't getting into it. I did like the magic. I loved the magic system. The way that the celestial magic was performed, it evoked such a beautiful picture in my mind's eye of how that must look when they performed it. I loved that. But that alone was not enough to keep me interested. So, and then the final book that I finished in the month of March is Before They Are Hanged, book 2 in the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. Again, this is a sequel that has cemented my love for this author. With the first book in this series, Joe Abercrombie showed his skill at writing characters. But in this installment, he really showed off his talent for plot building, storytelling. I freaking love this book. Definitely a 5-star read for me, and it just really overall made me love this series even more. The first one was all character driven. I'm not even gonna lie to you. It was character driven. There was a real hole as far as plot. I didn't mind because I was so enraptured by the way he was writing his characters. I enjoyed them. I was chuckling every page. Now in this one, I didn't do as much laughing, but I was so caught up in the intrigue, all of the political happenings, the maneuverings, the battles that are taking place on the precipice of this huge war that is just looming. I cannot wait to read the 3rd book in April. Absolutely cannot wait. But I do feel this is a series that a lot of people would find enjoyable. And so that will take care of everything that I read in the month of March, what my star rating was for it, a few thoughts about each. Have you read any of these books? Did you agree with what I thought? Do you have some difference of opinion you would like to share with me down in the comments down below? I never get tired of talking books with you guys, so definitely open up the conversation down below or come visit me over on my Discord. Link is always in the description box down below. Guys, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this little video. I hope your morning is off to a great start. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.